I'm pleased to be back for our next panel today. We've heard a lot about the harmful policies that rogue prosecutors around the country have enacted, and we've heard a lot about the harmful policies that George Gascon has enacted here in Los Angeles County. But what we haven't heard from are some of the people who have unfortunately been directly impacted by those policies. And so that's why it's my privilege tonight to host this panel with three individuals who have been impacted by those policies, who have kindly agreed to come share their stories with us and talk about their cases, their experience in the criminal justice system, and their experiences dealing with George Gascon's district attorney's office. So immediately next to me is Imelda Hernandez. Next to her is Emma Rivas. Next to her is Anna Estevez. And at the end of the table is Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney John Hatami. Thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. And I want this to be a conversation this evening. And so I was hoping, if it's okay with each of you, maybe we could just go down the table and you could tell us a little bit about yourself, tell us a little bit about your loved one's case, and how your experience with the criminal justice system has been so far. So Imelda, if it's okay, I'll turn the floor over to you.
So my name is Imelda Hernandez. My son, Christian David Silva, was murdered in February of 2020, and actually tomorrow's his birthday, so we're celebrating his third birthday without him. And George Gascon has affected me and my family in many different ways. So for me, because the deputy district attorneys were able to sue Gascon and get an injunction, with my case, I was able to hold on to the special circumstances and gang allegations. But recently, 2 weeks ago, when I went to court, my district attorney told me that there's a possibility that one of the defendants, his new lawyer might want to do another pretrial for his case and possibly ask to have the gun allegation removed. So I cried. That was a fear that I had because of what the other victims' families have gone through.
Sure.
And every day since he was elected, I constantly on a daily basis think that I'm going to get a phone call that something is going to come up in his case. And so, it doesn't sit well, because on top of having to grieve my son, Christian, I also have to live in fear that something's going to come up in his case.
Sure.
And so I deal with that daily.
Sure.
And so that's where I'm at right now.
Of course. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Emma?
Yes, my name is Emma Rivas, and I am a parent to a murdered son killed by a gang member. The gang member shot 2 out of 3 of my sons, so my case is a little bit more complex. All 3 of my sons were involved in the shooting. It gets tough because I could have lost my whole entire family in one day by one individual. I got involved with this.
Take your time.
It's hard. My prosecutor for my son's case called me when around February. I think it was around January last year. He said he had some bad news for me, and I thought he was going to tell me that he released the gang member that killed my son and left my other son. He survived, and my other son witnessed the murder. My biggest fear was that that gang member was going to be loose, out of jail. And he said, no. He goes, I have a new boss, and his name is George Gascon. And he ordered all his prosecutors to drop the gang enhancements, gun enhancements, and I didn't know what that meant to my case. And when he explained that the enhancements were very important on the table because that adds more time to the criminal that murdered my son. So it would have been like about 20 more years added to the case. And it was hard to accept that a district attorney that's supposed to put criminals in jail was going to be lenient towards the guy that murdered my son. Trying to tell that to my other two sons that were part of the shooting was very hard. I kept that to myself for a while because that was going to hurt them more than they've already been through enough. And
Sure.
Gascon has been like a thorn, worse than a thorn. He's been, I have not been able to sleep since he took office because I keep juggling that that the guy that murdered my kid is going to have leniency from this district attorney that has empathy for him and not for my family.
Sure.
And Gascon has failed miserably as a DA. He's failed me as a parent that lost a child to murder. He's failed Imelda. He's failed Anna. And I'm actually a board member to the Parents of Murdered Children, the LA chapter. And there's more parents that are affected by his directives and his removal of enhancements. Sure. And they're always asking me, how's things going with with George Gascon?
Sure.
And I always have to tell them, you know what, just keep praying for us.
Well,
And that's my
well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Emma, I do want to ask you, because one of the things we've heard from George Gascon is that victims and victims' families actually support many of these reforms. But it certainly sounds like that is not your view, and it hasn't been the views of other victims' families that you've talked to. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, that's a fair statement. I go to two board, I actually belong to 3 very big organizations. I belong to Parents of Murdered Children. I belong to Justice for Murdered Children. And I'm part of the POMC in Orange County. And I never have been in a room. I have been in many rooms with many parents to murdered children, not have ever heard one parent ever tell me, please be lenient towards my son's
Sure.
murderer. Let me tell you, every parent that I have encountered, and I have encountered many, they want the full, the most you can give someone. Pretty much throw the key away and never let their murderers out in the streets.
They want justice.
They want justice.
For their loved
And
ones.
justice for us as parents that lost our children to murder is that person never has freedom ever again. Our children can never have freedom. Our children will never walk this earth. Our children were taken from us. We didn't ask to be in this journey together. We were brought into this journey together as parents of murdered children. And Gascon has not shown an ounce of sympathy. He has never shown an ounce of empathy. I've been to so many meetings for parents of murdered children, and I've never heard ever a parent say, I want the person that killed my son or daughter out.
Sure.
Ever. Now, what he's talking about, it's a made-up group that were victims that became criminals that became victims, and that's his what is it? His new science and data. Oh, look at these criminals; they became victims, and now all of a sudden he's using them as to portray us. And there's never, Zach, I could tell you right now, you'll never come in a room where there's parents of murdered victims ever tell you they want leniency towards the criminal that killed their kid.
Sure.
I've never heard them say that.
Sure. Well, thank you for sharing
You're
that,
welcome.
Emma. Anna, I'll turn it over to you. And if I could, just to be sure we can hear everyone, if you'll just pull your mics close to be sure we get good audio, that would be great.
Just put.
Yep, that's perfect.
Okay.
Great. Go ahead, Anna.
Well, first, I want to thank you for having me here tonight.
Of course.
My situation, I think, is a little unique, and as horrible and heartbreaking as this may sound, I am grateful that my son's case was handled before Gascon took office. Because a lot of the issues that survivors are facing, I didn't have to. What I am concerned about is the resentencing directive, because my ex-husband, in fact, on April 21st of this month, it'll be 5 years that my ex-husband suffocated our 5-year-old son in the back seat of his vehicle while my son was trapped in his car seat after a date at Disneyland. And according to Gascon's resentencing directive, his philosophy is that after 15 years, regardless, a person can potentially be released. There's no justice in that. Not at all. So that would mean for me in 10 years, my ex-husband might be walking free. That is completely unacceptable.
And another one of George Gascon's policy directives, he's no longer sending deputy district attorneys to parole hearings to be with victims'
Yes.
families. What's your response to that, Anna?
I think that's insane. The deputy district attorney who handled my son's case was amazing, and I could not imagine having to go back to court and being in the same courtroom as my ex-husband without having representation. I'm not an attorney,
Right.
but I have learned a lot about the law over the past 5 years. But I would feel completely lost and devastated, quite frankly, if I didn't have someone who could be a voice for me in the legal arena. I think that's absurd. I think
Right.
that he has no empathy or consideration for victims and what the impact of losing a child has on a person's life.
Sure.
It's life altering, and life as we knew it will never, ever, ever be the same again.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. John, you've prosecuted a lot of cases. You've worked with a lot of victims in the past. What's your response to hearing these stories?
You know, I think people need to understand that once you lose a child, I think a small part of you,
A big part.
right, and Anna's right, a big part of you is gone.
Sure.
And I think until whatever belief system you have, until you pass away, and I do believe rejoin that child, I think you're not, fully whole until that happens. And so it is a incredibly difficult situation to wake up every day and to just operate, just to be a person. And so you have a DA who really does not care at all, because our main job is standing up there and fighting for victims and for their families. That's our job. And he does not believe in that. George Gascon does not believe in that. He cares more about the criminal or the murderer than he does about fighting for justice for the families and for a child. And I hope people realize this. Before I think this journey started, I didn't know Imelda, I didn't know Emma, and I didn't know Anna. And I think through this journey where we now have George Gascon in office, I consider it an honor that I got to meet them. I consider it an honor that I'm sitting here with them. And I believe we become friends. I believe we become family. And I think they realize that a good prosecutor is somebody who cares.
Right.
That's it, somebody who cares. And if you have a prosecutor, a DA who actually cares, I think that so many other things can be improved. And right now, we just don't have a DA who cares at all about this community.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing that, John. So I'd like to open it up to all of you now, if I could, and follow up on a couple of things that you said. Emma, you mentioned that you received a call from the assistant, from the deputy district attorney.
My son's attorney. That was the worst call I can ever imagine getting. Well, actually, the second one. He just like, Emma, I hope you're sitting down. And I'm like, God, this is like really bad for me to sit down.
Right.
I go, yeah, I am. And he goes, I don't know how to tell you this, Emma, but I got a new boss in the office, and he made us call our. He goes, you came to my, because he had other cases. He goes, I called you first because I know you believe in God, and when he told me that his boss asked him to remove the gang enhancements and the gun allegation, that was just something ignited in my heart. Like I felt like somebody took my heart out of my body and took it out. I mean, I've already lost my son. I can't bring him back, no matter how much time he gets. But I want to have some kind of sense of justice that I never have to walk near this guy again. I am a believer in God, and God has asked me to forgive, but I want justice.
Sure.
And justice for me and Imelda and Anna is that we never see that person out in the street again. Just like we'll never see our children, they shouldn't have that right either. They're the ones that did this to us. We didn't become victims on our own. We were part of their craziness.
Right.
That call shifted my whole world around. I have not been able to sleep since then. I have not been able to work 40 hours a week. It has affected my other two sons when I had to tell them that the guy that murdered your brother and almost killed you has a DA that has empathy for him but not you guys. And I think that's how I met Jonathan.
Sure.
And Imelda and Anna.
Sure.
We were brought into this journey because of Gascon. And the reason I got involved after that call, 2 weeks later, I seen on Facebook, they were pleading for victims of violent crimes to come out to the Hall of Justice to get the petition started. And that's how I met Imelda on the side.
We met that day.
That day,
Almost
and a year, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I met Anna along the way. But that was the beginning of my, I have to get involved. I can't sit at home twirling my thumbs, wishing somebody else can fix my problem. If I have to go out there, and I never really spoke about my child's murder. I kind of kept that in my own little world. Never wore my son on my shirt. I mean, I had it shirt made out of him, but never actually literally wore it. And this whole last year, I have been carrying my son in my chest, and Jonathan has been a big part in supporting me, and when we go to rallies,
Sure.
he always, lets us know he's out there supporting us, and he's been our voice.
Great. Imelda, how did you find out about these new policies of George Gascon, and what was your response to them?
When we went to a preliminary trial, and we walked into the Norwalk courthouse, something just felt weird. Everything, the air was just really thick. And when we got onto the floor where the trial was, I saw my district attorney, and she was crying, along with my advocate. She was crying. The tears were coming down. And she told me about Gascon and all the phone calls that she had to make to all these families in regards to removing the enhancements, in regards to resentencing, in regards to letting them go. And it got to her. And the air was just thick that day. And ever since then, it's been really weird at the courthouse, right? It's just
Sure.
this. I feel, I'm not saying that she's not. She's doing the best job. I love her.
Right.
But they just have so much on their shoulders with their own boss, who does not support them.
Is not allowing them to do their
Not
jobs.
allowing, she will do that. She'll get fired first before she doesn't do her job. She told me she's just like Jonathan. They'll get fired first before.
Because they want justice.
They want justice, yes. My son deserves justice. His children that he left deserve justice. That's why I'm here. I'm here for my son's legacy. They don't know what's going on right now. They're only 11 and 7. But when they're older, they're going to know that I did, that we did, that Jonathan, that we as a community did everything that we could for justice, for my son and for our children who were murdered in the streets. They were innocent. They're murdered by gang members who are now allowed to, okay, you can't say that they were in a gang, even though they're tatted up. My son was shot in the head with a bullet, but no gun allegation involved. You can't say
Right.
that. I mean, come on, this is ridiculous. This is ruining our cities.
When you talk to your friends and family members about some of these policies, about some of your experiences at court, when you found out this information, what is their reaction to this?
It's sort of 50-50. Okay, some of them, they understand, they're on my side. Others, they don't understand. They don't know who Gascon is. They don't know what's going on in the courts. And so, yes, they support us, but until you have a child who's been murdered, you cannot walk in our shoes.
Sure.
It's tough being right here with you now.
Sure.
Sometimes we'd rather be home in bed grieving, but some of us have to be out here to represent
Right.
parents of murdered children and come out on behalf of them and fight for justice. But it's been hard. And they are Democrats. Some of them voted for Gascon. I know family members who voted for Gascon, and they signed the petition. And I'm hoping that they continue to sign for this recall.
And is part of that basically an education effort on your part, saying what these policies are, what exactly is happening at the district attorney's office?
It is. I think the best way for us in the Latino community is sort of print out just the bullet points and go through that.
Sure.
Because the way they talked about criminal justice reform, it sounded like for victims, but it really wasn't. You know, Gascon supports murderers.
Right.
Gascon supports criminals. He has yet to meet in a roundtable with Justice for Murdered Children, Parents of Murdered Children chapters, Justice for Homicide. He refuses to meet with us. Why? Why can he not sit like you and have a discussion with us about what our thoughts are and how it can be incorporated into these reforms, you know?
Have you and other groups asked him to have those conversations with you?
We have. We've asked his clown sidekicks, and they just come back and tell us. They don't tell us anything.
But they don't set the meetings.
They don't set the meetings. But we see them with BLM. We see them with criminals and their families, but not with us.
Anna, how did you find out about these new so-called reforms that were being implemented in the DA's office?
My mom. So after my son's murder, I became very active in terms of speaking for victims. So I did some advocacy work at the state level here in California and in Washington, D.C., to help pass a resolution here in California and one in D.C. And it takes a lot out of you, being a survivor, having these conversations, sitting here. It drains you. And every time we talk about it, it's like reopening the wound. But I think that our stories are powerful, and I think that they need to be heard, because the public sometimes, they're not educated. They don't know, and people have a tendency to live in their own bubble, in their own little world. And unless something directly impacts them, they can't relate.
Right.
And so I think it's been not even a year. My mom, bless her heart, wanted to go to a rally in Whittier, here in Whittier, California. And she told me that Jonathan was going to be there. And so that was less than a year ago, actually.
That was last year.
Yeah. And so she asked me to go with her, and I didn't want to go, because after all of the advocacy work and just, the drain, I kind of stepped back a little bit. And so I went along with her, and that's when I met Jonathan, and we talked. And, I'm honored that he's doing this work. I'm so grateful that he's fighting for victims, because victims don't have a voice. My son was 5 years old. My son should be 10 years old right now. He never had a voice. And people like Jonathan and Eric and all of the other DAs who are fighting for us make all the difference to us. And we may not say it, but they do, and we thank them, and we're grateful. We appreciate them. And so when I met Jonathan and had a conversation with him, and he shared some of the things that Gascon was trying to implement, I thought, this is just absurd. There's no way that I can stand back and not advocate, because some of the things that he's doing is just, it makes absolutely no sense, and it's shameful.
Absolutely. Jonathan, what do you think the biggest need is from the DA's office in terms of helping victims and their families work their way through the criminal justice system? What do you think is lacking right now in that department from the DA's office?
A good DA. We have a horrible DA. And
someone who will enforce the law?
Exactly. The biggest thing that's lacking, and it does affect victims and victims' family members, is the district attorney and the policies of the district attorney. And so we have a district attorney that doesn't care about victims and doesn't care about the family members of victims. He refuses to meet with most of them.
Right.
He made a statement that there's so many murders in Los Angeles, he just can't meet with most of them. All the policies he implemented, he never talked to any of the family members before he did that.
Right.
All of the cases that he affected, he never sat down with any of the family members and said, this is what I'm going to do to your case. Can you talk to me about it? Can you talk to me about your child? Can you talk to me about what happened? He never sat down with the prosecutors on those cases and said, hey, I'm going to now get rid of these allegations or enhancements or strikes. Tell me about the evidence in this case, or tell me about the facts in this case. And so we don't have a good DA, a caring DA, an empathetic DA. When a parent loses a child or a loved one, the first thing they're doing is looking to somebody to help them deal with that. And hopefully they get a good detective on the case, and then they're hopeful that someone is going to file that case and stand up in court and fight for them. And when they feel like they don't have that person, they're lost.
Right.
And so the criminal justice system is already really, really difficult for family members, because there's a lot of continuances. The cases take years to finally end. The statements and the verbiage in court is difficult to understand. And so you do need a caring and empathetic prosecutor to walk you through that process. You know, I always tell my victims and their families, this is your case. I'm just the prosecutor, and this is your case. So you try to empower them because a lot of their power has been taken away.
Right.
The DA in the office now doesn't understand any of that because he's never tried one case. He's never filed one case. He's never sat down with the family members and talked about that case. He's never had to bring a sibling into court and have to ask that child questions. He's never had to deal with a child victim. And so he doesn't have these type of experiences. And so he can't relate. And like Imelda said, he only cares, and what I see is he only cares about defendants and criminals and what they're going through. He'll talk more about what people are going through in prison than he'll talk about the suffering
Right.
that families are going through. So it
Right.
tells you that that's where he's coming from. So yeah, we need a new DA.
Well, one of the things, we've heard a lot about the special directives, the new policies that George Gascon implemented when he came into office. And one of them was specifically related to victims and victim services. And so if it's okay, I'd like to read a portion of that and get each of your reactions to it. So this is directly from Directive 20-12, entitled Victims Services. And in the introduction, it says, when a person has been harmed, wronged, or experienced loss at the hands of another, they need justice and healing. The criminal justice system must ensure that they have the rights and resources necessary to defend themselves. Anna, what's your reaction hearing that coming from George Gascon's office?
That's such a hypocritical statement. If he's not allowing deputy district attorneys to represent us in court, how do we have the resources that we need? I mentioned earlier, we're not attorneys.
Right.
We don't know how to necessarily navigate the legal system and speak the jargon. So I think that statement is just absurd, and it's false.
Right. Emma?
He says that we need healing.
That's what the statement said.
Healing is knowing that the killer to our kids stay in prison the rest of their lives. That's healing. Therapy can only help so much. I've gotten therapy. The hurt is still there. The wound's still there. Missing my child is still there. Going to court is difficult to watch the guy that murdered my son smiling. He gets to say hi to his family, and he looks like he has no remorse. But I don't know what he's talking about healing. Healing for us will never be complete, ever. John said it one time at a rally about, he looked over, he goes, that mother will never get healing till she's called home. And I absolutely believe that, John. When I go home with the Lord and go be with my son, that would probably be that end of my hurt. But for right now, my hurt is just open with Gascon. Every time I see him, the wound, it's just open, and it's just not closing. I don't care how much therapy I get. Therapy for me will be that person that murdered my son will never have liberty, freedom ever. That's my reality. That's what I feel inside that should be happening. Anybody that kills should never be free. It's just that simple.
Imelda?
Well, he talks about services for victims and helping victims. In January, I couldn't make it to a court date, and Christian's father went, and we had a new advocate. This advocate has, I don't even know where he came from. He doesn't even know where he came from. And the advocate that I had prior to that was well versed in gang type of murder cases, so she was on it. So my ex-husband, Christian's father, went, and he was with this new advocate who showed up. They missed the court hearing because it was the wrong case. And then this time around, 2 weeks ago, I texted him the day before. I asked him, are you going to show up? You didn't even reach out to me. Am I going to see you there? I'd like to be escorted. I don't like to see the murdered family, the families of the murderer.
Sure.
And I did not get a text back. Not even, I don't care about you. That would have been nice, just something, but nothing. So Gascon's a hypocrite. He supports murders. He's pro-criminal. And I don't believe a word he says. That's why he must be recalled and replaced immediately.
What happened when you showed up to your next court date? Did you ever get in contact
No,
from
I
the
haven't.
victim's advocate?
No. In fact, I've been wanting to call the department and get a hold of his boss, but his boss, I believe, is, what is her name? Tiffany?
Oh,
Tiffany Blackwell, I believe.
Blacknell.
Oh, yeah. So that's not going to work out because she's pro-Gascon, pro-criminal. Yeah.
Jonathan, what's your reaction hearing that from Imelda?
The first thing is I just don't really listen to anything that George says is because he's not really a prosecutor. So he doesn't, I think things just come out of his mouth, but he's not a prosecutor, and he's definitely not a caring person. I think the families, first off, they want a small sense of justice. They know they're never going to get their loved one back, but they want somebody to go into court and be their child's voice and fight for that child and have a jury hear what happened and hold that person who did it accountable for what they did. And that is a small sense of justice. They also want to make sure that that person is punished and that person is not released back into society. One, because the punishment has to do with the fact that they killed another person. But two, you can ask these moms, they don't want that person to get out to hurt somebody else.
Right.
The hurt that they're going through, they don't want another mother
Right.
or father to have to now deal with that. And you never hear that from George. You never hear George talk about the fact that if he's going to release all these individuals, that they're going to go and victimize somebody else.
Right.
And the problem is usually when that happens, it happens in communities of color, communities in areas where I don't think George Gascon cares. He says he does, but he doesn't.
Well, I see we're running short on time. And so I wanted to end with get your final thoughts on a final topic. One of the things you all mentioned and that we've heard from other folks as well is that George Gascon and other rogue DAs across the country won't meet with victims and their families. And so my final two things I'd ask you to respond to, what would you say to other victims and their families who may be experiencing this as well, who are not getting the justice that they deserve from their district attorney's offices? And then since George Gascon will not meet with each of you, what would you say to him if you can take this opportunity to respond directly to him? Imelda?
Gascon, stop fear-mongering the community and stop giving false information and false hope to the citizens of Los Angeles County. And to the victims, to the families of the victims, I carry you in my heart. And when you feel like you're giving up, don't give up. You're a warrior, and we're warriors for you. We're with you.
Emma?
Mr. Gascon, first of all, I don't work for you, but I can't stand you. What you have done to LA and all these parents and all these future victims, you're an evil person. You have an evil heart. You have shown more empathy towards your criminals than us as parents that lost our children. We'll never see our children, but you have a soft heart for criminals, and I don't really have anything nice to say about you, Mr. Gascon. All I know is that I am going to stay on this recall until you are moved out of office, and we can have a new DA in office that cares for the victims and not criminals. And for the victims, there are resources out there. There's Parents of Murdered Children, Justice for Murdered Children. Join a group with the other parents that can help. Just remember, we're out there advocating for all victims. I don't just advocate for my son. I advocate for public safety. And this is a public safety matter, Mr. Gascon, and you have failed Los Angeles miserably.
Anna?
What I would say to George Gascon is drop the facade. I actually registered for, I want to say, a webinar that he did, hoping that I would be able to comment or say something, and all participants were muted. We had to submit any comment or question ahead of time, and what was submitted was not shared publicly. Only the good stuff was shared. So what I would say to him is, for 5 minutes, close your eyes, imagine all of your children together in one place, and then picture all of that disappearing because somebody murdered them all. They took everything from you. I had one child, and he was taken from me. So unless you know what it feels like to be a victim, don't pretend, because you don't know. You don't know what it's like to wake up every morning and say good morning to your son, and knowing that he's not there. You don't know what it's like. But I wish you would take 1 minute to speak to a victim so that you possibly could hear another perspective other than your own bias. What you're doing is shameful, and I truly, truly hope that you are recalled, and I will continue to fight to make sure that you are. And for families of victims, I can't speak specifically for each one, but I can speak for us all. I know how devastating it is. I know how heartbreaking it is, and we stand together and always, always, always try to find the courage, the strength to voice your opinions, to share how you feel so that our victims are heard. Thanks.
Thank you. John, any final thoughts?
If I had a chance to talk to George, I would say, George, resign, leave Los Angeles and go back to San Francisco. We don't want you here. And for all of you and for all the victims, I want all three of you to know, and all the victims, the prosecutors in the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office, all of us are going to keep fighting for all of you and for everybody here in Los Angeles, no matter what George says, no matter what George does. We will keep, and you have my promise, fight for all of you.
Thank you.
Until you get justice.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of Heritage, on behalf of my co-author, Cully Stimson, I want to thank each of you for being here tonight. We really appreciate you sharing your stories with us. We will certainly keep you in our thoughts and our prayers, and we will continue trying to shine a light on the problematic policies that rogue prosecutors like George Gascon are implementing. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course.